of course, was the chain of events that led to the loss on January 29th of 67 lives. I continue to pray for the families of the victims of that tragedy. They suffered an unimaginable loss. In our 24-hour news cycle, it's very quick to forget the events behind us. However, we can't lose the perspective of these families. We must keep them top of mind in all that we do going forward to honor their memory by making flying in America safer than ever before. And I can assure each of you that if confirmed, my top priority will be public safety and restoring the public's confidence in flying. I watched the March 27th hearing, and I believe this committee understands that the FAA is at a crossroads. In the years preceding that tragic night in January, there were 85 similar misses at Reagan National. We ask, how did this go unaddressed? It's not acceptable. Failure to recognize and mitigate this risk was an oversight of the FAA's safety management system. Thankfully, this administration has already taken swift action to secure the skies over our nation's capital by permanently restricting non-essential helicopter traffic and eliminating mixed traffic at Reagan. It's also my understanding that the FAA and the Department of Defense are reevaluating the agreement that governs certain military operations in the area to prioritize public safety. Meanwhile, the FAA is launching new initiatives with new tools to identify other hotspots at airports around the country to inform them whether similar restrictions may be necessary. This is the kind of work that should have been done years ago, and I'm encouraged. I've been in the field of aviation for over 35 years. I know change can be hard, but I believe the agency can get back on the right track if we can all agree first that the air traffic control system needs significant investment. Prior to accepting the President's nomination, I asked President Trump if I could meet with the senior team at the FAA. They're a talented group of dedicated professionals. During that meeting, they expressed their concerns with the outmoded analog technology, obsolete facilities, and chronic staffing challenges at our nation's air traffic control centers. Airline passengers pay significant taxes which are intended to modernize our systems and ensure that we maintain the most advanced air traffic control capabilities in the world. However, I was informed that more than 90% of the FAA's nearly $6 billion annual budget for modernization is actually consumed with the maintenance and sustainability of the old system, leaving virtually nothing for modernization investment. President Trump has provided us with the right vision. Secretary Duffy and the team have been working diligently on defining the plan and the workforce surge. And if confirmed, I will work closely with this committee to articulate our strategy and to competently execute the plan. I'll work closely with the professional men and women at the FAA to provide the leadership that is necessary to execute the President's vision to build a new, best-in-class air traffic control system and to rectify the chronic understaffing at our nation's air centers. However, to accomplish this, I hope we can agree we can't repeat the mistakes of the past. We can't accept half measures. In closing, it's equally important to me to reinvigorate the safety culture at the FAA, to become proactive and fully invested in a vibrant SMS culture. I seek transparency, frequent communication, and radical accountability to rebuild the trust among our FAA workforce and with all of our aviation stakeholders. I hope today we can show this will be a bipartisan effort, a shared commitment to restoring uncompromising safety, fidelity, and reliability to our national airspace system. Together, we can design and build a new system which will allow the emergence of new technologies such as drones and advanced air mobility aircraft to be safely introduced into our NAS and to usher in a new era of innovation and opportunity for American aviation. Should the Senate choose to confirm me as the next FAA administrator, I pledge to work collaboratively and transparently with this committee to communicate frequently and candidly about the agency's challenges and our strategy to overcome them. But most importantly, I pledge to uphold the sacred trust placed in us by the American people. I welcome your support and your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bedford. As I mentioned in my opening statement, no FAA administrator has served a full 5-year term since Administrator Michael Huerta left in 2018. The past 2 Senate-confirmed administrators left early, requiring acting administrators to serve, including for nearly 18 months under the Biden administration. If confirmed, will you commit to providing the FAA with stable leadership and to serving the full 5-year term?
Mr. Chairman, I couldn't agree with you more that the inconsistency in leadership and the turnover that we've suffered over the last 25 years has to change, and I am committed to you, to this committee, to serving the full 5-year term.
Terrific, thank you. The commercial space launch industry is critical to our national space program, to national security and global competitiveness. In the last few years, we have seen a massive surge in the demand for FAA-licensed commercial space launches, with more than 200 launches per year expected in the near future, which will add considerable strain to the airspace system. Nearly every user of the national airspace system pays something back into the system to help cover their operational costs. Yet under current law, space launch companies do not, and there is no mechanism for them to pay, even if they wish to. The reconciliation text that this committee released last week creates a phased-in approach for commercial space companies over a period of 10 years to begin paying a user fee on FAA-licensed launches and reentries. As commercial spaceflight expands rapidly, so does its impact on the FAA's ability to operate the national airspace system. This proposal accounts for that. Provided that there is an on-ramp, should commercial space companies pay to offset some of these costs?
Thank you for the question, Chairman Cruz. I certainly don't want to get ahead of the administration and on policy issues, but I will confirm you're exactly right. Airline users, passengers, and airlines themselves pay significant taxes, and as I said in my opening statement, those taxes are designed to modernize our NAS. And one of the things that is absolutely critical in modernization is making sure we design a NAS that it can accommodate an increased cadence in space launch. So I certainly support where you're going with that.
Thank you. Last week, President Trump issued executive orders to advance the integration of new aviation technology, such as drones, air taxis, and commercial supersonic aircraft into the airspace. I have long advocated for the FAA to take steps to move these technologies forward, including in last year's FAA reauthorization by creating the Center for Advanced Aviation Technologies. Secretary Duffy recently selected a consortium led by Texas A&M to manage the center in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, with testing corridors located throughout Texas. Will you commit to leveraging existing resources at the FAA, including the Center for Advanced Aviation Technologies, to implement President Trump's recently issued executive orders?
Well, despite my connections as an alumni of Florida State University, I would be more than happy to work with the folks at Texas A&M. I think research and design is critical. Technologies are moving at light speed now, and what we can't allow is for the FAA to hold it up. We need to be part of the innovation and not part of the problem.
Thank you. In January, as we all know, an Army Black Hawk helicopter conducting a nighttime training flight collided with American Airlines Flight 5342, which was on final approach to DCA. All 67 passengers and crew on board both aircraft were killed. In the months since the crash, we have learned more about the poor design of the airspace that created a, quote, intolerable risk to aviation safety, according to the NTSB. Republic Airways is one of the top regional carriers at DCA, and indeed had a flight involved in a go-around involving military aircraft earlier this year. If confirmed, what actions would you take specifically to improve the coordination between the military and the FAA, especially around DCA?
Thank you for the question, Chairman Cruz. First, I'd like to congratulate both yourself and Ranking Member Cantwell on your recent introduction of legislation to demand the investigation from both the Army IG as well as the Inspector General. We need to shine a light on this. Transparency is going to help us find permanent solutions in terms of how we're managing the NAS. You're correct. At Republic Airways, we operate almost 150 movements a day, Here at Reagan National, we've had multiple, resolution advisories, 3, frankly, since the 29th of January. So the problems persist, and more work needs to be done.
In May, Secretary Duffy announced his plan to modernize the air traffic system. This committee will provide the FAA with over $12 billion for the most urgently needed improvements, such as replacing the outdated telecommunications infrastructure that broke down and has caused persistent issues at Newark International Airport. What specific accountability mechanisms would you implement to ensure that the FAA is successful in this modernization effort? Additionally, how would you track and verify that real progress is being made?
Well, thank you for the question, Chairman Cruz. I think in all of our office visits, and we talked about this, the accountability is going to be top of mind. And if confirmed, I will be the Chief Accountability Officer here. On the one hand, I could tell you we have an opportunity to bring commercial practices into the FAA in terms of how we run a competition using American manufacturers to take technology that exists today, not moonshot technology, but things that we're installing in Dubai today, making Dubai the world-class aviation system. That technology needs to be deployed here, and it needs to be deployed now. So I hope we can work on a bipartisan way. We'll develop the plan, the strategy to execute it. We'll develop the project management plan with clear lines of sight on the deliverables and the commitments that we will contractually demand of our commercial partners in installing the NAS. I will say this, just as an area of concern that I've had through my diligence in this process, our procurement process needs to change. We need to think more commercially. The men and women at the FAA are telling me that if we run the normal commercial process, we're going to be 3 years before we see anything showing up in the airspace. And I think in deference to the families that are with us today, we owe it to them to move quicker.
I fully agree with that, and thank you for your leadership and willingness to serve. With that, I recognize Ranking Member Cantwell.
Thank you. Mr. Bedford, we had a conversation in my office about SMS in general. And do you believe that the FAA should have a real SMS system for themselves?
Well, thank you for the question, Ranking Member Cantwell. Thank you for the time in your office and the substantive conversation that we had. And thank you sincerely for showing leadership last year coming out to visit us at the Lift Academy. So thank you for all of that. I will tell you that SMS is truly the lifeblood, and I'm sure you know that it was in the Aviation Safety Act that we mandated SMS for all commercial Part 121 carriers. So that became the standard, which I think moved the needle on aviation safety in a significant way.
Well, it has to be implemented, and you have a general counsel who definitely shortchanged it in the first Trump administration, and I have a fear he's going to shortchange it in this one. So my point is, you and I talked about there's 2 different SMS systems within the FAA. Given the accidents that have happened with both the MAX and this, I think it proves that both of those systems aren't really working. Is it just your viewpoint? Is that your viewpoint, that there's something wrong with the SMS that the FAA is using today? If we've had these 2 horrific accidents, or actually 3 if you include both MAX accidents.
So I think we are all aligned on this. Something's amiss.
Okay.
I think we believe that the SMS system at the FAA needs a radical overhaul. I think we can do it. It's complacency, not having SMS in a binder on a shelf somewhere, but actively, daily utilizing SMS and safety risk management assessments as we're looking at change. Change itself is not bad. We shouldn't resist change and hide behind a shield of...
So you'll help enforce I have so many safety questions.
No, go ahead, sorry.
So you'll help enforce manufacturers to use SMS. You'll help get a better SMS system at the FAA.
As we discussed, it's a key tool to actually doing the job right the first time.
Okay, 1,500-hour rule. There's a lot of concerns because you worked for a company, you were part of a lobbying effort, you came here and tried to change this rule. What are you going to do in your term, a full 5-year term as my colleague is suggesting, that I'm all for consistency at the FAA. We got a big job here. What are you saying that you will do to recuse yourself from a 1,500-hour rule that you, as administrator, could initiate? So during your term, will you initiate such rule?
Thank you for the question, Senator Cantwell. I'm sure I'm going to get that question multiple times today, and I'm looking forward to actually clarifying the record on that. But I can tell you the President's vision right now and what we've discussed is the urgent need to modernize the air traffic control system, fix the FAA staffing shortages, and redesign the NAS for emerging technologies and innovation. So that will be my uncompromising focus.
I get that, and I appreciate that. But people are going to want to know, families who've lost loved ones because of the safety implementations that have taken place, they want to know whether you're going to lead any effort to change that rule while you're administrator. So you can think about it some more for the record. You can give us a firm written answer, but I think a lot will be depending on that answer.
I appreciate that.
Because people, you helped fund and lobbied for a change for it.
Well,
So,
if we have time, I can respond to that now.
yes, but could I ask you something else first, and then we can
Go
get
ahead.
back to that?
Of course.
A very important issue we also discussed in my office is this C-band, high C-band sale that my colleague and others are proposing as part of this bill. And last time we ran into a lot of interference on that. So we have joint studies that say this is a safety issue. What is your view?
Well, my view is I'm not informed enough to formulate an opinion. I can tell you from a past experience, we felt very rushed in terms of spectrum sales and rolling out the technology. So I hope we've learned some lessons from the past and will be much more collaborative and coordinated before we simply execute a plan. We need to ensure that the aircraft are operated safely within our nation's airspace systems, especially Class B airspace at congested airports.
Well, what's going to happen if this goes into effect?
Well, honestly, I don't know where the spectrum bands are, so I can't speak, competently about the issue. I can
Well, we
tell
had
you
a
we're
very different
concerned.
conversation in my office, and you told me that the last interference was a big problem, and you told me that this would be a big problem. And so I need consistency, because it follows the 1,500-hour thing. You can say now, I'm not going to do 1,500 hours, but if you get in there and then you get pressured and you do 1,500-hour changes, it's a different story. And on this, in my office, you clearly said there were interference issues, it was a mess, and you definitely didn't want to have future altimeter problems. We can't have sale of spectrum and then have altimeter interruptions or problems. We need to work cohesively on test bedding these issues.
I couldn't agree more.
Okay, so do you have concerns that this is premature to move this without that test bedding?
The record is clear. We had significant challenges with the last spectrum rollout. We had interference with radio altimeters. We needed to invest in our aircraft with filters to make sure that they could operate safely. I said, for the record, that we should learn those lessons of the past and act more collaboratively rolling out. So I am advocating
We're not acting collaboratively right now, I can tell you that. Okay, so I see my time has expired. I do want to clarify, you are for us closing the ADS-B loopholes, right? And moving forward on ADBS in and out. As part of Next Gen, the whole system, you're for moving forward.
I am supportive of ADS-B-in and ADS-B-in-like technologies that put more control in the cockpit, alerting our pilots of traffic that's impending in their areas, yes. And that would be including requiring our military operators in airspace to also operate visibly.
And ADBS out too, just in the transmission, making sure they do both.
And TCAS, and making sure that our warfighters' equipment's also properly maintained and working on both TCAS and ADS.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I would note, Mr. Bedford, that Senator Cantwell asked a series of questions about spectrum auction, and Senator Cantwell has previously stated that this committee's spectrum pipeline language would require the FCC to auction at least 100 megahertz in the upper C-band, which is 3.98 to 4.2 gigahertz. That's true. What's not true is the claim that this poses a risk to aviation safety. First, the language provides 2 years for an auction to occur. Ample time, especially since the FCC has already begun work on this band. And secondly, the bill requires auctioning less than half of the spectrum in the band, giving the FCC and industry significant flexibility to avoid any adverse impact on aviation. The lower C-band, 3.7 to 3.98 gigahertz, which was auctioned a few years ago for 5G use, did prompt concerns about interference with radio altimeters. But despite this, there was no widespread disruptions or accidents. Mitigation efforts worked. That episode forced the FAA, the FCC, NTIA, and DoD, and industry to collaborate closely, and it worked. That coordination set a model for future spectrum decisions that is incorporated into this committee's bill. Transparency, urgency, mutual respect, and problem solving. Spectrum policy is not putting aviation safety at risk. On the contrary, the broader bill's FAA modernization funding will enhance it. Senator Fisher.
Can I just say, Mr. Chairman, that you brought up serving 5 years. And it was shortly after this debacle that Mr. Dixon decided, I've had enough. And I think the fact that he tried to negotiate in the first time this came through, and people couldn't negotiate, and people didn't negotiate. And the telcos just ran over the aviation sector, and the White House tried to mitigate it, and Steve Dixon more or less threw up his hands. So we got to get this right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bedford, welcome. Good to see you. Thank you for putting yourself forward for this important position and going through this confirmation process. I appreciate it. While this committee is prioritizing providing the necessary investment to overhaul our air traffic control systems, we know that funding alone is not going to solve the problem. Senator Shaheen, Lujan, Hoban, and myself were successful in getting our legislation, the Air Traffic Controller Workforce Transparency Act, included in the recent FAA Reauthorization Act. The bill requires FAA to provide Congress with detailed data on air traffic controlled staffing. What policies do you see as being necessary in order to improve that staffing?
Thank you for the question, Senator Fisher. It's a key element of my thought process going into the FAA. As I mentioned in my opening statement, the President gave me an opportunity to do some diligence before accepting the nomination. And in talking with the team at the FAA, the leaders that we have there, obviously staffing is an issue, but when you try to understand what tools they have in order to assess their staffing needs and to optimize the workforce, their productivity, and have adequate reserve levels, there just isn't much there. The cupboard's pretty bare when it comes to how we're scheduling the 17,000 controllers and supervisors in our nation's air centers. So I think there is some low-hanging fruit there that we can use to improve the tools that the FAA has to manage staffing, manage our productivity, manage our reserve coverage in a way that might close some of these gaps. Clearly, that has to be done in concert with growing the staff and make sure that we're utilizing all the resources that we have to train controllers of the future.
I look forward to working with you on being able to meet the needs that we have when it comes to our controllers.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Bedford, aviation manufacturing and maintenance is a prominent industry in the state of Nebraska with $2.7 billion in economic output in my state. These companies are dependent on the FAA to ensure adequate safety, oversight of aircraft, and enable products to get to market in the international marketplace. I'd like to understand your thoughts about the importance of the workforce. Can you elaborate on why this activity is important to innovation, competitiveness, and to leadership for the United States in this area?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question.
We discussed it a little in the office, but
we did, and I
think people need to hear this.
I appreciate the time that you offered. As Chairman Cruz mentioned, we have made significant investments over the last 7 to 8 years in our LIFT Academy, not solely developed or focused on pilot development, but also focused on maintenance technician development. And one of the challenges, I think we have two challenges, frankly, that we had to overcome in Indiana. We had to work with our high school guidance counselors to stop saying college, 4 years universities are your only pathway to success. They're not. Vocational jobs, technical jobs that we have in airframe, power plant, and technical positions are highly skilled and highly remunerative positions. And so we took matters into our own hands and created an earn-to-learn ab initio program for maintenance technicians. It's a 3-year-long journey, but we pay young men and women to come, and it's $70 an hour. It's not great money, but it's earn to learn. There's a model there that works. There are kids that are technically skilled, great with their hands, have a passion for aviation, and can serve in so many whether it's manufacturing, whether it's actually in a hangar for us, whether it's in aviation construction. There's just so many opportunities for growth and well-paying jobs. So I do believe the FAA can help lead in workforce development.
Very good. In the 2024 reauthorization, it included language that I championed to require the FAA to create a public-facing portal so applicants can track the status of their certification requirements, their applications. This portal is designed to improve transparency and help address growing stakeholder concerns over a very long and I would say somewhat opaque certification process. Do you see this as an important tool for rebuilding the industry's trust in that process? And if confirmed, will you prioritize completion of the portal and ensure that FAA meets that 30-month timeline for delivering a recommendation?
Thank you for the question, Senator Fisher. You could apply that same transparency across so many domains at the FAA. Talk about medical licensing. We have so many crews at our airline at Republic that have medical issues, as an example, and they go into a laborious process with no transparency and I don't know what level of accountability either, and they're essentially unable to earn income while they're waiting for their medicals to be reinstated. So I think there's, again, if Domino's can figure out how to show you where your pizza is in the delivery cycle, we should be able to figure out how to communicate with stakeholders, including our user customers, on where they are with medical situations, licensing situations. But in fairness to the agency, there's a million of these different licenses around there. So I don't know.
I would think in a 30-month timeline, though, to get this up and running and make sure it can work, that you could have a basic plan, a basic recipe, no matter how many different applications it's going to apply to.
I think that's exactly right. The application can work across these domains, so we can get it right once and then apply it across the agency.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Kim.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Bedford, thanks for coming on out. You know, in my home state of New Jersey, the top issue when it comes to the issues we're talking about here is still about Newark Airport. If you are confirmed, you would be coming in as we are rapidly trying to build solutions to be able to give assurances to the people, not just of New Jersey, but around the country and frankly internationally that are transiting through. Can I get your assurance that this would be a top priority for you if you are confirmed and sworn into the job?
Thank you for the question, Senator Kim, and especially thank you for the time that we had in your office. It was, I thought, a thoughtful and robust conversation. Like Reagan National, Republic is a huge user of the airspace at Newark, and I have to tell you, April and May were really, really tough months for us. In full disclosure, the industry works collaboratively with the FAA to ask how the agency is staffed and if it can manage the schedules that we'd prefer to fly. And they'll tell us, no, we can't do that. We want you to schedule this. So there's a lot of transparency and cooperation going on there. So it's really unfortunate for us when we schedule flights and then we can't deliver for the American traveler for holidays, weddings. We had two folks I know that couldn't get to where they needed to go for a family wedding. It's, it's not acceptable. So I will absolutely pledge to work collaboratively with you, with this committee, to make sure that the FAA is working with partners.
Thank you. No, look, I think that's important, and I'd love to be able to engage with you. Out to the Philly TradeCon, out to Newark Airport, but when I tried to follow up with the FAA and have a briefing from them to go through some of what I heard about, I'll be honest with you, we haven't heard back still. You know, that was what, looking at my records, May 21st that we put in a request for a briefing from a FAA. So I guess I just want to ask you, if you're in the seat, do you promise that you're going to work with this committee and also be able to address issues of individual senators, especially when there are particularly challenging issues within their home state?
I can absolutely commit to that and also commit to reducing the number of times we'll have to have those conversations.
Great, thank you. One thing that we talked about when we had our conversation, I asked you what your position on the debate about privatizing the FAA and the air traffic control system. I just wanted to see if you could elucidate that for the public here.
Thank you for the question, sir. I hope I'm not telling stories out of school, but when I met with the president in the Oval Office, he had asked me if I'd ever been in the White House before. And I said, I actually had. And he asked when. And I said, well, in 2017. And he kind of gave me a look, what were you here for? And I said, well, that was the last time you announced you were going to overhaul the air traffic control system. And he kind of chuckled and asked me, how did that work out? And it didn't work out so well. And if we're honest, it was because industry hijacked the conversation and turned it into a privatization debate. And we spent 3 years arguing about privatization, and we missed an opportunity to fix the system. We can always have a privatization debate, and we should at some point have a debate on whatever the merits are for funding continuity and visibility and contracting. But now's not the time for that debate. Now's the time to focus on getting the work done for the American people to rebuild this system. And that is President Trump's vision. That's what, his vision's what motivated me to.
So your focus right now is on modernizing, but that doesn't necessarily include privatization as part of the conversation right now.
As if confirmed as FAA nominator, confirmed as the administrator,
Sure.
I will certainly have an opinion I'll be willing to share, but not now. I think now is just not the time to have the privatization conversation. So much of the conversation we are having right now is about safety. And so 2 issues I just wanted to raise here. First, I talked to you about the facility we have in Atlantic City, the Hughes Tech Center. Yes. Love for you to come down and see it, but I just think that this can play a critical role in terms of how we process our thinking in terms of moving forward on safety. Does that make sense to you? I mean, trying to make sure we're mobilizing resources like the Hughes Center to be able to push forward and do the testing needed to be able to modernize in a safe way. Absolutely. I have to tell you, my eyes have been opened about the amount of research capability that we have. Texas A&M as an example, the research centers in the New Jersey area. I mean, we have we have them right here in McLean with MITRE. So we've got a lot of capability out there, but we need to create a strategy on how we're going to work together and collaborate. We can't have everybody working on exactly the same problem. Yeah. We've got a lot of challenges. Let's get the best minds working on it.
One last issue I just want to raise. End of last year, we had an issue in New Jersey where there were all these reports about drones flying overhead, and there's a lot of confusion about it. And frankly, a lot of the sightings turned out to be aircraft in the distance or whatnot. And I had talked about to FAA about this before. There was questions about whether or not FAA leveraging technologies like remote ID, drone squawking, their location, other things to distinguish appropriate versus unauthorized, unsafe use of airspace, especially near critical infrastructure and sites. Do you see a role for the FAA to try to have a greater ability for us to distinguish what concerns us and what is authorized and not when it comes to drone usage?
Yes, sir, I do. I think the FAA has to play a critical role in making sure that drones and AMM also integrate safely into the NAS. So we need to have a seat at the table. We should lead. I think the challenge we have right now is focusing on the NAS and making sure that we can walk and chew gum at the same time, that we can successfully, competently execute a plan to rebuild the NAS without holding back aviation innovation.
Thank you. With that, I yield back.
Thank you. Senator Budd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Bedford, it's great to see you. Enjoyed our conversation in the office a few weeks ago.
Thank you, sir.
It was great to see your beautiful family here as well. I understand there's a lot of folks here who had lost loved ones, both at the DCA and the Colgan Air Flight 3407 back in 2009. For those in the DCA, a lot of those were Charlotte-based flight crew, and so we remember them, especially me as a North Carolinian. So more than 15 years were between those 2 tragic incidents, and that's a remarkable record of safety. But both cases remind us that the work to improve aviation safety, it can never stop. I think you've made that evident in your comments this morning. Following the loss of Flight 3407, Congress passed legislation requiring 1,500 hours of flight time before pilots can qualify for their ATP, or their air transport pilot license. Now, this requirement, without a doubt, improved aviation safety and pilot training, but as a pilot myself, I know that simply flying in the pattern or banner towing, as some mentioned this morning, for over 1,000 hours, it's not enough, and it might even ingrain bad habits and poor technique. So, Mr. Bedford, are there any ways that Congress could improve the 1,500-hour rule to ensure pilots are not only getting enough flight time, but high-quality training as well? And are there new technologies that the FAA could incorporate into the 1,500-hour requirement?
Well, thank you for the question, Senator Budd. I do want to just acknowledge with the Aviation Safety Act of 2010, there were many significant movements in aviation safety, including requirements of stall upset recognition and recovery training. Probably the most important was combating pilot fatigue through very rigorous Part 117 time and duty limitations. You legislated requirements for pilot mentoring and pilot development and pilot standards. And as I said earlier, that was the introduction of the requirement for SMS for Part 121 airlines. So when we think about the Aviation Safety Act of 2010, it's just so much richer than just any one of those issues. But I've been a supporter of 1,500 hours, contrary to what some of the press might say, because it did require structured training for an ATP CTP. That requires at least another 30 hours of classroom curriculum. It requires at least another 10 hours of advanced flight simulation training, requires the successful completion of a written exam and a multi-engine check ride. So I am a big supporter of structured training as opposed to pure time building. And for the record, the FAA agrees. The FAA promulgated multiple pathways under its authority, a 1,250-hour pathway, a 1,000-hour pathway, and a 750-hour pathway, because they concluded the data supported that advanced training and structured training produces safer outcomes and more proficient pilots. So my North Star will always be safety, not equivalent safety, but better safety.
Thank you for that. So if you're confirmed, you'll likely oversee a multi-billion-dollar project to upgrade and modernize the ATC. That project comes at a time when multiple new aviation technologies are scheduled to enter the national airspace, such as drones, eVTOLs. They've already begun limited operations. And on Friday, President Trump signed an executive order requiring the administrator to repeal the prohibition on overland supersonic flight. I couldn't be more grateful to the President for his leadership on this issue, and I look forward to working with this committee to advance the Supersonic Aviation Modernization Act to codify this executive action. Mr. Bedford, will you commit to implementing the President's executive order if confirmed?
Thank you for the question, Senator Budd. I can tell you I'm as excited about anybody about the opportunity for the innovation that's happening right here in this country and to be a world leader in things like supersonic technology and quiet boom technology. It's pretty neat. I've been on the pointy end of the stick on electric vertical takeoff and landing planes, flown many of the simulators. That's exciting stuff in terms of creating urban air mobility. And we haven't talked about it, but reconnecting many of our rural communities through the use of these very cost-effective tools, these aircraft integrated in our NAS. So yes, I would absolutely look forward to getting to the fun stuff of innovation in America.
Thank you. Boeing's MAX 7, MAX 10, the 777X, and the 777-9 are currently in the FAA certification process. And Boeing's challenges have been discussed at length in this committee, and none of us want to see Boeing or the FAA compromise safety and quality. But at the same time, Boeing has $500 billion in backlog orders for the next 20 years. And China is aggressively expanding its aviation manufacturing capabilities. Mr. Bedford, how will you ensure that the FAA has the skilled workforce, technical capacity, and institutional focus needed to ensure a timely and rigorous certification process of these aircraft so the U.S. can maintain its lead in aviation manufacturing and not lose ground to China?
Well, thank you for the question, sir. I won't call myself a certification expert. I do believe that there have been, sadly, some really hard lessons learned through the failures of MCAS as an example, and finding the gaps in our certification processes. So sadly, there has been a lot of learning, and it came at a steep price. So I look forward to advancing our certification technologies, processes, employee development around certification, and certainly holding Boeing accountable to deliver a high-quality product safely, listen to its workforce, take the tools that we have to make sure that we're looking at defect rates as an example. It's an indicator potentially of processes in the manufacturing line. So I do believe there's data that we can use to make objective determinations, but we can also help Boeing by not simply saying this fails. We can collaborate, tell them where the failures are and how we view remedies that can help Boeing move the process along a little bit quicker.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Lujan.
Mr. Chairman, I would yield to Senator Duckworth, who was here before I was boss.
All right, although I will say, at least in the gavel rule, Senator Fetterman is next on the...
I'm fine with that too, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Senator Fetterman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And welcome, and welcome. I think I'm going to say something again because I think it's absolutely true. It is incredibly, incredibly safe to fly in America. Do you agree with that?
I do agree with that.
Yeah. And again, I think I'm an expert because I'm a consumer. I'm at the airport at least, I think, 48 out of 52 years of the year, maybe more sometimes. And I have a lot of skin in that game to affirm that. And I know a lot of that part of the conversation after that awful tragedy in DCA or earlier this year. But could you affirm, that it can be made safer? Anything can be made better. How do you see that? Trying to balance that we can also acknowledging that. I mean, it's a modern marvel, in how things working and things continue to be incredibly safe.
Thank you for the question, Senator Fetterman, and I hope I get a chance to come visit with you and have a more detailed conversation about this. Republic Airways has a huge maintenance base in Pittsburgh. I mean, so we've got routes that go way back to our Chautauqua days. I can tell you that the aviation system has multiple levels of redundancy, 3 levels of airspace management redundancy, and then the ultimate, final level of safety is in the cockpits with our nation's well-trained aviators. But we shouldn't have to lean into the 2nd or 3rd or 4th level of redundancy to keep the system moving. The system is old. It needs upgrading, massive upgrading. So we have to do better. We can do better. There's technologies that exist today, not theoretical development technologies, but stuff that's on the market today, made by American manufacturers, that they're selling abroad. And we can induct this technology here at home and establish not only a more cost-effective NAS, but a higher reliability and a safer NAS.
Thank you for that. So my job kind of collided yesterday. Homeland Security, and we were talking about the security about a lot of the international events that we're going to be hosting here in our nation. And then I brought this up, so I'm going to bring it up today because I think it's fairly appropriate. Philadelphia, in my state, of course, is hosting 6 World Cup matches in the next year, coming up to the weeks up until July 4th, which is also part of the big 250 birthday party for our nation. So millions and millions are coming across all around from the world. And then also for the 250 birthday. Now that's been described as the day before Thanksgiving for 3 months. Is that accurate?
Expectation within the industry is we're going to see significant volumes, not only through our airport terminals, but certainly on our aircraft.
Do we feel like we're going to have enough time and we can do more supportive to make sure that we staffed up and we do the kinds of appropriate changes to make sure that we're able to handle all that kinds of incredible volume?
Well, unfortunately, I think the challenge we're going to face accommodating all the demand that will be there is the fact that the airspace itself is holding us back. We're already oversaturated in terms of commercial demands on the system to the point where, as we saw Secretary Duffy's re-regulation of slots at Newark. So we're at a point now where the air traffic control system itself is holding back demand that Americans have to travel.
Thank you. So and my second question, and this is absolutely not a dig, it's actually just a sincere thing. In 2023, my former colleague, Congressman Cartwright, secured $3 million construction project at the Mount Pocono Airport, and it's 2025, and it's still, we haven't had that yet. And again, I'm not calling anybody on the spot here. It's really just a sincere place. And now I refer to him as my former because now it's represented by a Republican, a new friend and colleague there. And, important part of the economic regional parts of that equation. And it's like, I would love to work together with you to really develop those kinds of resources because it's really, I think it's important.
I agree with you, and while I'm not an expert in that particular area of the FAA, I've been watching a lot of C-SPAN recently, and I've been watching a lot of hearings, and I've heard the acting administrator speak on that point. They know they need to get caught up, and I believe the agency's working diligently to do that.
Yeah, okay, thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Young.
Mr. Bedford, major U.S. airlines are already employing artificial intelligence and machine learning on a daily basis to optimize flight operations, streamline maintenance, enhance scheduling, and improve overall customer service. As the FAA undertakes that complex but necessary task of modernizing the national airspace system, the thoughtful integration of artificial intelligence and machine learning presents perhaps a strategic opportunity to enhance both efficiency and safety at the same time. How would you, as administrator, work to ensure industry is not generally prohibited from voluntary deployment of AI solutions in a manner to increase safety or efficiency? So for instance, how AI could be used to better predict stress points in airplane diagnostics, or the need for updated technology in ATC towers.
Thank you for the question, Senator Young. You're absolutely correct. There are some marvelous opportunities to improve our oversight and surveillance of our aircraft. Most of our aircraft today are digital. They're flying computers. They have sensors, hundreds of sensors across the aircraft. Managing that data by hand through normal algorithms has become increasingly more complex. We're experimenting with the use of AI in a targeted way, safe, cyber secure way, and just to experiment with its ability to help us predict and refine our maintenance plans to make sure we're having higher safety and reliability. But there's certainly concern. There's concerns of how well we understand it, how we deploy it, how we manage data security. So it is an emerging process. I'm not an expert in it, but I can tell you the industry is beginning to experiment with it and to be leading on that effort as well.
Well, assuming you're confirmed, and I believe you will be, I would expect all sorts of technological developments in this area, and maybe technologies to become available in coming months or years that neither you nor I could conceive of. So will you work with this committee and other stakeholders to prioritize AI, machine learning solutions that might enhance safety and operational efficiency as administrator?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let me turn to another emerging technology. We had an opportunity to discuss this a bit when we visited in my office, but it's UAS, or drone technology. As we look at the ban on DJI drones, which I actually think was appropriate, we're going to have to look at how to dramatically boost our domestic production. It's not enough to design the best drones, and we arguably design some really sophisticated ones, but we also have to be able to produce and field the best drones. Indiana, our home state, is making great strides in this field, as we discussed yesterday. How are you thinking about integrating the testing of UAS into the national airspace system?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I can tell you I've spent a lot of time both here domestically and abroad looking at these emerging technologies, selfishly for how we can utilize them either to advance our flight training missions and or advance our commercial interests. So I'm thrilled about the development we're seeing, and I'm thrilled that a lot of this is actually happening here in the States. So it's a fantastic opportunity for us to innovate here. I will tell you that we are behind. We're seeing a lot of these rollouts happening now in real time. I was in Dublin in January, and this is already happening. This isn't new stuff. We are behind. We have to recognize we're behind and figure out how we can collaborate to jumpstart entrepreneurship here in the United States.
Well, I agree, and to the extent that having a stable and clear regulatory atmosphere around UAS is fundamental to continued development and ultimately deployment of the systems, I'm all in, and not just all in to work on this committee, but to work with you. Would you welcome that sort of collaboration?
I would sincerely welcome that.
Okay, excellent. Well, I want to do the best I can to support the President's leadership in this area. I noted his recent executive order on boosting domestic drone capabilities.
Absolutely.
Last thing I'll touch on, just very briefly with the Chairman's indulgence, is, of all things, affordable housing near airports. This is in recognition of the valued work that you're intimately familiar with of our low and moderate income workers in and around airports, from maintenance crews to custodial staff to food service workers, baggage handlers, security personnel, ground transportation staff. They all need places to live. It's not uncommon for them to face significant barriers to accessing affordable and conveniently located housing, as I would also add, to the extent we want workers of long standing who touch on the safety impacts of our whole aviation ecosystem. We want to retain those workers. We ought to be accommodating their housing needs near airports. So given all these persistent challenges and value propositions, would you be open to exploring potential partnerships with housing professionals, airport authorities, and municipal stakeholders to develop workforce housing solutions in areas that are outside of FAA restricted areas, but within airport authority or municipally owned land?
Well, Senator Young, I can tell you, my home airport that I fly out of at Executive Airport in Zionsville is in fact building, on the periphery of the airport space itself. So it appears there are ways to harmonize the availability of underutilized land for, better purposes, whether that's housing or manufacturing. I think there's a lot of opportunity there that we can evaluate, but I would like to believe the FAA will be a good partner in that evaluation process.
Great. Well, I'll look forward to working with you on that priority as well. Mr. Chairman?
Thank you. Senator Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank my colleague, Senator Lujan, for his generosity. Mr. Bedford, I'm going to go back to the 1,500-hour rule. You know it's coming.
Yes, ma'am.
You have spent years railing against the rule, and in 2022, you asked the FAA for an exemption from it. If confirmed, you would have the authority to reduce the number of flight hours below 1,500 if you determine that the pilot attending an academic training course will, quote, and this is the actual quote, enhance safety more than requiring the pilot to fully comply with the flight hours requirement, end quote. No administrator under a Republican or Democratic administration has ever made such a finding, and I would submit that now is not the time for less actual cockpit time for pilots. This is a perilous moment for aviation safety. After a rise in close calls coming out of the pandemic, we had our first major commercial crash in more than a decade. Air traffic controllers are understaffed, overworked, and using antiquated equipment that is increasingly likely to fail, as we saw in Newark. Well-trained pilots are our last line of defense. In incident after incident, it has been the pilots who have made last-second decisions to avert disaster. In Austin, when a FedEx plane came within 150 feet of landing on top of a Southwest plane, 150 feet, it was the FedEx pilots who spotted the danger and took evasive action. In Chicago, when a Southwest plane landing at Midway came within 200 feet of a jet crossing the runway, it was a pilot who aborted the landing. Mr. Bedford, will you commit to not reducing the number of flight hours currently required for pilots?
Well, thank you for the question, Ranking Member Duckworth. We had a very spirited conversation. Your passion on this issue is commendable. Your active service for our country and the loss that you've personally suffered, I just have tremendous admiration for you, both as a pilot and as a legislator. I don't think we actually have a lot of gap between where we're at. We both want to have the safest pilots operating our aircraft, correct?
Yes, but you're not answering me. I mean, reclaiming my time, it doesn't sound like a yes. It sounds like you're leaving the door open to reduce the number of flight hours from 1,500.
What I'm saying is I don't believe safety is static. And I can tell you, we've worked closely with our military, evaluating how they're training pilots. And the way they're training pilots today is not the same way they were training pilots in 2020, 2015, or 2010. They're taking advantage of emerging technologies and utilizing them ways to create more pilot proficiency. And the FAA, as you know, has already said structured training, real structured.
Let me, reclaiming my time. I think you should probably read an article about Army aviation pilot training. They're actually seriously re-looking at it because they've relied too much on technology. And in fact, there's an article out, a statement from the Army's flight training, the general in charge of flight training, saying actually they need to return to the basics because they're relying on too much technology. Will you at least commit to not reducing the number of flight hours until FAA has fixed the air traffic controller staffing shortage and modernize our nation's air traffic control equipment and facilities?
Ranking member, I can say two things. First, this is not my priority. My priority is fixing the air traffic control system. I met with the families of 5342. This is top of mind across the country. When I fly, and I fly frequently, customers come up to me because they see me talking to our pilots and they ask, when is it going to get better? I'm like, what do you mean? Like all of it. When is it going to get better? And that is my guiding. And also maintaining safety. I will not roll back safety. There won't be safety loopholes. I commit to you, we will never do anything to reduce the safety and competency of our pilots.
Okay, so that's still not a yes answer to my question. Will you at least commit to taking any potential changes to pilot flight hours before the Air Carrier Training Aviation Rulemaking Committee, or the ACT-ARC, and abide by their consensus recommendation?
I am telling you, I won't unduly influence a process one way or the other. The data will either support it or it won't.
Will you abide by their recommendation?
Most likely. I haven't seen it. I can't commit to things that I don't know.
Okay,
But I can commit to you that we will not have anything that would reduce safety, full stop.
So I've asked you four questions on whether or not you will unilaterally reduce the 1,500-hour rule and that you will resist it, and at no point have you answered yes. So you are leaving the door open. On to the next thing, Boeing oversight. In October, the Department of Transportation's Inspector General found FAA's oversight of Boeing was not effective. So I'm asking you, yes or no, will you commit to not delegating inspection authority back to Boeing until FAA has implemented all 16 of DOT OIG's recommendations and DOT OIG considers them closed?
Well, thank you for the question, Ranking Member Duckworth. It's my understanding that ODA has been renewed for another 3 years, so Boeing's got a long way to go before they're going to get another bite at that apple.
All right, I'm out of time. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Moreno.
First of all, thank you for your willingness to serve. Could you show the people what you have at your desk to your left?
Oh, it's my father-in-law's crucifix and rosary.
And the reason I ask that is, what role has faith played in your career?
Well, if I was being perfectly honest with you, sir, up until about 1999, not a lot, not as much as it should have, but I had a wonderful experience, conversion experience that brought me much closer to my faith and to Christ.
So when we're talking about these issues about how these technologies, we can be very clinical here, talking about 1,500-hour requirements or technology or AI, and I think that's all really important. But ultimately, when you take this job as the administrator of the Federal Aviation Administration, you're putting the lives of tens of millions of Americans in your hands. I think it's just important for everybody here who's looking at judging whether your nomination is that faith is it fair to say that faith will play a role in how you conduct your job?
When I talk to the families and we talk about, I sympathize with your loss, that's not just words. You know, I suffered loss as well. You know, I used to have a sister. My parents had a daughter. Now, she didn't die in an aviation accident, but she was run over at a traffic stop, pedestrian accident. So I absolutely understand what you're going through, and I appreciate your loss. And I would never do anything to compromise safety as administrator in this organization. I can promise you that. I can promise everybody on this committee that.
Thank you, Mr. Bedford, for that. So let's go shifting to your business career. I just want to restate the record. Business guy myself, I don't think we really spent enough time highlighting your career. You took a company from 85 million, and I know million doesn't mean a lot here in Washington, D.C., but 85 million in revenue to 3 billion. That's an incredible accomplishment. I think I just want my colleagues who maybe haven't been in the business world to just sit back and reflect on the scale of difficulty of taking a business from 85 million to 3 billion. That is a remarkable accomplishment. So congratulations to you. A culture in that growth.
Well, thank you for that question, because I think that's so germane. We're out here today with the FAA is building a winning culture, and leadership literally starts from the bottom. We have to support the team. We have to make sure that we identify clear objectives, communicate those objectives, and then and show them how we're going to walk the talk to accomplish these objectives. And I think all these things are possible. When I had an opportunity to speak with the team at the FAA, I asked them, what are our goals for 2025? They don't have any. Okay, well, what's our strategy? What's our strategy for tackling the air traffic control system? And the answer was, we're just going to keep working at it hard every day to make it work. You know, that's just not the kind of leadership that we're going to need in order to get the job done. This is, I don't think this is a moonshot project. It's not a Manhattan project. We can get this done, and we can work together and get it done very quickly. I think Secretary Duffy's right. We can get this done, and we can get it done in single-digit years, not decades.
Well, if you take just a fraction of your track record and your success and you implement that at the FAA, I think you're going to leave your kids and grandkids an incredible legacy. So it's amazing that God puts us in different places at different times, and He certainly put you here in this charge. My final question is this. Are you familiar with a piece of legislation called the One Big Beautiful Bill Act?
I have heard something about that.
Now, would it surprise you to know that there's been almost no coverage in the media? I haven't heard one of my Democrat colleagues, I hope they do, we have an opportunity coming up in this testimony, to point out that that bill has historic investment in modernizing this nation's air traffic control system. So your leadership, combined with the fact that we finally have a bill that will completely, for the first time in decades, do what honestly should have been done a long time ago and modernize our air traffic control system. If you strike me as probably like me, you're not somebody who tends to gamble, but I don't think the media will ever report the fact that this bill has that level of historic investment. And I hope that you take this opportunity that's been given to you to make certain that you take this time and that we modernize our air traffic control system and leave a legacy, not just for your kids and grandkids, but for all of America. So thank you for your willingness to serve. Thank you for saying yes to President Trump. And to President Trump, congratulations on yet another remarkable nominee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And at long last, Senator Lujan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. Mr. Bedford, thank you for being here. I'm going to continue a little bit from the questioning you just had with Senator Moreno. I'm also a person of faith. Reminded that some of the teachings that we've had in our lifetimes, Matthew 7:12 tells us to do unto others as we want them to do unto us, to treat people with respect and dignity, keep our word. It's part of the Golden Rule mantra. There's times in our lives where we're affected by something, tragedy. There's a family here that hasn't met with the Secretary of Transportation, even though there's been request and request and request. I know an invitation was sent out not long ago, gave the family just a couple days. Families are busy. Something of this magnitude we should work to make happen. Will you commit to advise Secretary Duffy when you're confirmed to meet with this family and give them the time to make sure that they're able to be there in person and meet with them?
Well, thank you for the question, Senator Lujan, and I agree with you. You know, we need to treat people with dignity and respect. You know, we were all created in the image and likeness of God, and that shared humanity is what should help us to be able to work in a bipartisan way and put the American people's interests ahead of any of our political interests. And while I'm thrilled about the $12.5 billion down payment, I would clarify, for the new system, I do believe Secretary Duffy is a man of great character and ethics and integrity, and I can't explain why he has not yet met with the families, but I would certainly have a conversation with him to do so.
So you will commit to advise him?
I will.
I appreciate that very much, sir, and I appreciate the line of questioning from Senator Moreno as well. I mean, we should chat about in all that we do. Now, Mr. Bedford, we appreciate you taking time to visit with me yesterday in the office. We had a good conversation. One of the questions that I asked was about a filing from 2022 that you sent over to the FAA, and you argued in a petition that if you were granted the exemption from the 1,500-hour rule, that it would help, quote, renewed industry-wide commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, close quote. Do you still stand by those words?
So first, thank you for the time that you shared in your office. You're a very gracious host. I can tell you that when we established the LIFT Academy, what we were trying to do is open the aperture of economic opportunity for families who otherwise can't afford to do flight training. And we all know those families that are on the lower end of the wealth scale, who they are and what they look like. That shouldn't keep anybody out of being able to take advantage of these transformational careers. So I do believe an alternative to asking families to take on $300,000 or $400,000 of debt, or us begging government for student loans so they can leverage these families to take on debt, we as industry can work collectively to open that aperture, and we're doing that at the LIFT Academy. Now, it's not free. We're asking people to come work for us for a year. I asked my own son, if you want to fly and you want to go to LIFT, you need to come work as a crew scheduler for a year. He did it for, I think, 16 months. Congratulations. They demonstrate their character, their reliability, their intellect, their teamwork. I mean, so we get a chance to essentially take them out for an audition, and then we give them a 50% discount. Now, we ask for something in return. We ask for them to come work for us, as we do the folks that were on our Earn and Learn technician program, which I think is perfectly fair. So, but what we're doing, and I can't remember Satrina's last name. She came to us. She spent a year and a half as a flight attendant. She applied to our academy. As you can guess, Satrina, she's a person of color. And she went through our LIFT program. She completed her first officer training with Republic. 3 years later, she upgraded to captain with us. And just recently, she's taken a job with American Airlines.
Mr. Bedford, my time's quickly going to go away. Do you stand by those words?
I absolutely stand by. We need to do more to create economic opportunity for those who have little.
I'll take that. Mr. Bedford, in your petition, you also noted that access for underrepresented communities, you would, quote, see no adverse impact on safety. Do you agree, yes or no, that the United States can promote diversity in the aviation industry without compromising safety?
So I agree there's no check-the-box requirement here. If you've got the chops, the skills, the mindset to be able to do the work, I believe in a meritocracy. We just have to give them the opportunity to demonstrate that they've got the capability to do it. We fail out 60% of our private pilot students that don't. I mean, we run a rigorous program. So you can try. You should have the opportunity to try. But if you can't do the work, you can't do the work.
Mr. Bedford, that sounds like a yes. I'll give you a chance to say yes or no.
I think we're saying the same thing.
Sounds like a yes, and I'll take that. Do you believe the DCA collision earlier this year was caused by DEI policies?
Okay, I don't have any earthly idea what role.
I appreciate that. I yield back. Thank you.
So, Mr. Bedford, I just want to second that Senator Lujan is a phenomenal host, and I hope he gave you the spicy pistachios. With that, I recognize Senator Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Bedford. Good to see you here today, and thank you for taking time in my office last week. And as you recall, when we were together, we discussed the Gerald R. Ford International Airport in Grand Rapids. It's a small hub airport that is growing, but its 62-year-old tower is a growing safety risk with line-of-sight limitations that are physically limiting the airport from expanding to meet the demand that continues to grow. And I know you have some firsthand experience with that as well. I know that the tower at GRR is one of the many backlogged FAA towers in need of replacement. This administration, without question, has made a lot of promises regarding investments into air traffic control facilities. But unfortunately, I think we're missing some details and we're missing some hard commitments with those kind of broader promises. It's unclear how much money is actually needed to address the tower replacement backlog and to modernize our air traffic control infrastructure, including towers at individual airports across the country. I'm pleased to hear that you are supportive of investments into our ATC facilities. With that, so I just have a series of a few yes or no questions regarding this issue. Yes or no, if confirmed, will you work with us on a plan to replace GRR's tower sooner rather than later?
Well, thank you for the question, Senator Peters, and I thank you for the time in your office, by the way, and I have to give a quick shout out for all the folks in Michigan who are watching the hearing today, so they're looking. I will tell you that $12.5 billion is a great start. It's going to take a lot more than that. I have not had the benefit of seeing the plan. I know that Secretary Duffy has all of those details. Hopefully we'll be able to bring that to the, to the transparency before the committee. But $12.5 billion is enough to get started for sure. We have aging infrastructure across the country. I've watched numerous hearings. I've heard the acting administrator testify that there is some rubric, some process, some methodology on how to prioritize the tower. So I would absolutely agree to work with you and see where Grand Rapids is in that process and just make sure we're all on the same page.
Well, I appreciate it. And sooner rather than later would be, so all the folks from Michigan watching.
Shout out to Western Michigan University.
They're watching you right now, so we appreciate that. Yes or no, do you agree that we need a major infusion of facilities and equipment funding specifically to address air traffic towers? I think you've answered that. If confirmed, do you commit to sharing with my office exactly how much money is needed to address the entire ATC modernization backlog, including the replacement of outdated towers?
So, again, I can't speak for Secretary Duffy. He erected a wall. Once I agreed to accept the nomination, I've had zero contact on what's in the plan. I know as much as what I've been able to read. I would like to hope, again, as I've said in my statements, that we'll have absolute transparency, accountability.
That's what I'd hope. If we would try to accomplish, if confirmed, obviously, that we'll be able to do that. Yes or no, do you believe that funding for air traffic control modernization should be contingent on closing or consolidating other air traffic control facilities?
So I don't know. I don't know what's in the plan. I hope in a bipartisan way we can be open to deploying the people's capital in a judicious, wise way. So I'd be willing to work, again, with the Secretary, with the President, with this Commerce Committee to make that happen.
Well, if confirmed, would you support the closure of any air traffic control facility without consulting air traffic control staff and representatives from the region, or will you include them in the process?
I would think it would make sense to have our controller workforce included in the process.
Excellent. Good. So that's a yes. Thank you. Mr. Bedford, you have been outspoken regarding your support for Essential Air Service program, and I want to emphasize again today my concern for Michigan's 9 EAS airports due to the proposed $308 million cut to Essential Air Service. And I know we've had this good discussion that attracting service to rural areas, holding airlines to their commitments and ensuring that this program receives the necessary funding is going to be a continuing priority for the state of Michigan, second in the country in terms of essential air service to get to all of our areas, particularly in northern Michigan. I know that's not directly within your purview for the FAA, but I think it's likely that you will soon be in the room, if confirmed, when those changes to the program are discussed. So in that scenario, will you commit to me that you're going to continue to advocate for EAS airports and advocate against the kind of cuts that's going to limit service to our rural areas in Michigan as well as around the country?
So I believe I saw in Secretary Duffy's testimony his commitment to EAS. It's obviously something I'm passionate about. I did all my flight training at a Flying Cloud Airport in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. I've gone to all of the airports from Bemidji to Brainerd to Duluth. So keeping these airport communities connected to the system is important. But the cost of EAS has exploded, and I think there's an opportunity now where we can look at these emerging technologies that are going to find a much more cost-effective and affordable solution to connect and reconnect many of the communities that we have and do it in a cost-efficient way so that our tax dollars are going most efficiently deployed.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and I will say the Minnesota shout-out right before Klobuchar's questioning was very well done.
Well,
I've been so looking forward to meeting you.
Very good. Well, thank you, and thank you for your willingness to serve. So not only were you using those airports, you're a former CEO of a Minnesota-based regional airline, Mesabi, near and dear to my heart, only because the name Mesabi is the Iron Range where my dad grew up.
Sleeping giant, yeah.
That's right. And we also have strong connections to aviation from our regional airports to the major hub at Minneapolis-St. Paul, which I think once again was voted the best airport in North America. And we also have Cirrus Jets, one of the few
Fly an
domestic
SR-22.
manufacturers. Yes, exactly. So we care a lot about aviation. And so my first question is, I appreciated your answer on EAS, but could you just talk about the importance of federal funding to upgrade our airports, like our air traffic control towers? Minnesota is home to one in Duluth that Representative Stauber, my counterpart in the House for that part of our state, have been working on. It's the third oldest one in the country, often floods. And could you talk about the need to upgrade our air traffic controllers? I discussed this with the Secretary when he was sitting in your chair.
Well, thank you for the question, Senator Klobuchar. And I hope we get an opportunity to have an office visit. We can have
I'm sure we'll make that work, yes.
a longer policy conversation. But I think the need is universal and bipartisan. Both here in the House, there's a strong recognition that the system needs significant investment. We seem to have bipartisan support for a down payment of $12.5 billion. We have to be honest, that's not enough. We're going to have significantly more investment. We've talked about, are there budget neutral ways to do that? I think we can for sure look at the $5 billion a year we're investing in sustainment of the current system and look at that as a future savings opportunity. And in an industry, we can present value that back to something that could be over 10 years worth $40 billion of savings to the Treasury. So yes, I think this not only is urgent and necessary and will help, increase our ability to service, emerging technologies, but I do think there's a very strong payback to the Treasury and to the American taxpayer.
Good. In your testimony, you mentioned the chronic staffing challenges at our air traffic control centers, and we must ensure our air traffic controllers have the staff they need to keep our skies safe. I did work with former Senator Braun to include a provision in the FAA reauthorization requiring the agency to conduct maximum hiring of air traffic control candidates at the FAA Academy. Secretary Duffy, and as you know, we had seen some increases. Then, of course, came in this kind of across-the-board firings of new employees. Then they were exempted, and some people left. Secretary Duffy has called for a supercharged program for controller hiring, and you have testified you will work to rectify the understaffing. Could you talk about how you will ensure that the FAA is conducting maximum hiring of air traffic controllers?
Well, thank you for the question, Senator Klobuchar. So, as you may be aware, we have spent years and tens of millions of dollars developing workforce opportunities for the future. We're doing earn and learn programs as an example for our technical staff. We've abated 50% of the cost of pilot training through our Lift Academy. So it's near and dear to my heart to make sure that we're casting the widest possible net to get the best people we can, to give them the best training that we can and the best tools in order to have the best outcomes. And certainly what the Secretary has shown us a few weeks ago and the big rollout of the system is the tools that we're giving our workforce are unacceptable. So I think we've got some leadership challenges, funding challenges, but these tools are just not acceptable to continue to utilize and have the NASA of the future that's going to be able to take advantage of emerging technologies.
Okay. Yesterday, I sent a letter with Senators Duckworth and Warnock requesting that the FAA provide an update on the implementation of the provisions that were included in a bill I'd done with Senator Moran, who I just see is here, to boost the FAA's 625 grant program to recruit and prepare students for aviation careers. Do you believe it is critical to fully fund the FAA at the levels authorized under the FAA bill?
Well, thank you for the question. I want to be careful here because I'm not in the FAA, and I couldn't tell you whether the funding is enough or too much. So I'd love to have an opportunity to do the job, do the work, put a critical eye on it, and then get back to you.
Okay. Last question is just about, we know the horrific fatal crash very close to where we are now. There was a near miss. One of my staff members was on the plane of a Delta flight, which happened with some military aircraft and a jet bound for Minnesota. It was nearly all my constituents. I led a provision in the FAA reauthorization bill to help planes avoid collisions by ensuring they have the technology to alert pilots, and many of my colleagues, including ones that are here right now, have done similar things. Do you agree that adopting new technologies can assist, and what should we be doing when it comes to these near collisions?
Well, thank you for the question. Look, we do have some terrific technologies that are here today that we can implement. There's always going to be points of friction in terms of how we allocate airspace based on equipage. So I think we need to have the stakeholder conversation. I agree we need to get more alerting systems on the cockpit so that it's another level of safety and redundancy for our commercial airline pilots. But we also have to be sensitive that we don't want to inadvertently cut off regional airline markets if their aircraft aren't upgrading. The good news is I think we have solutions for that now that we can pursue and have the best of both worlds.
Very good. And I will tell you, I've been very impressed how all the grandchildren have remained in control. Some of them are wandering around, but not by themselves.
I haven't been able to see,
back.
but you should know we have a couple of Eden Prairie born children here too.
Okay, excellent, very good. Thank you, and now I think Senator Blackburn is next.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. And I want to add my condolences and my thanks to the families that are here today from the DCA crash and the Colgate crash. And we appreciate the commitment that you're making to be certain that the skies are safe and that passengers are going to be safe. We want to welcome you. Congratulations, Mr. Bedford. And indeed, I think the children, the babies deserve a treat, as we call it at my house, with the little ones when this is over. You and I talked briefly when we visited about pilot retirement age.
We did.
And this is an issue that comes up repeatedly because people are so frustrated. They go to get on a flight and the crew is timed out. They don't have a flight. Everybody is there, the plane is there, and they end up waiting a couple of hours to get a pilot. And I have worked on this issue because I think if we don't take the lead on this, that it is something that is going to leave us with more flights that are stranded. And I know that ICAO is looking at this issue. So I would like for you to talk just a little bit about that issue and how you would approach the pilot retirement age.
So thank you for the question, and thank you for the time in your office, by the
Sure.
way. It was lovely. This was a big issue during the whole FAA reauthorization debate. There was, and can't remember which side of the legislature it was in, the House or the Senate, but we had age 67 in at one point, and it didn't make its way through reconciliation. We had a lot of debate on the merits of it, which are, I think, pretty clear that we have really experienced pilots that still have a lot of gas in the tank, desire to serve, and a lot of mentoring that they can bring to the table for the younger workforce that we're developing for the future. So those that wish to serve, having an arbitrary mandatory retirement age doesn't seem like the right answer to me. But then there's the logistics of the fact that these men and women are actually at the top of the fleet food chain. They're flying in the left seat of the most advanced wide-body aircraft across the planet, and that's great. We have to be sensitive to the fact that the disruption that it would cause if, in fact, they can't operate wide-body airplanes and have to be, deregulated down to a narrow-body jet may prohibit them from even wanting to serve. So ICAO has now somehow become very critical in the process to encourage them to increase global retirement age. We've successfully accomplished that, moving from 60 to 65. I think it's absolutely possible to accomplish that in a reasonable period of time.
Well, thank you for that. Talk for a minute about your record at Republic, because you did transform that airline and you increased the fleet, you increased revenue, and you kept an eye on safety. So I want you to talk about that commitment to safety and how you carried that out in your career.
Well, thank you for the question, and a quick shout out to some of our Republic pilots that are here. Thanks for the support. It was a collaboration, and it wasn't easy, I'll tell you. We didn't get it all right. We made a lot of mistakes as we were building a business, but we were able to recognize the mistakes we made, correct them, and continue to move on. I think that's a culture that we can bring to the FAA. It's okay to try things and fail, again, not jeopardizing safety, but we can innovate. We won't always get it right, but we'll get a lot of it right, and then stuff that we don't, we can fix and continue to innovate. So I think that was, if you think about all the challenges aviation's faced, 2001, obviously, 9/11, and I have to tell you, the incident and the crash at 5342 brought back a lot of PSTD for me, because we have, almost 150 operations a day at Reagan, and for the first 15 minutes when we got our Mir 3 alert, we had no idea whose aircraft that was. It's a heart-sinking feeling to think it could have been one of ours. So by the grace of God, it wasn't. And again, my deepest sympathies to the families that were affected. So I can tell you that culture is a clear indicator of a lean, agile organization that can manage change and work together. I think it starts from having a vision. We have to have a vision for where the organization is going. What hill are we trying to take? And then we can get our entire workforce to go on that journey with us. We can collaborate. It's not just me saying this. I've read a lot about the FAA organization, many reports, many agency reports that talk about the unwieldy organization structure, multiple spans and layers, silos across the organization. I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to lean into building a better, agile, more collaborative agency.
Thank you for that. And I recognize Senator Baldwin, and I turn the gavel to Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Senator Blackburn. I am going to yield a few seconds to Senator Moreno to correct the record.
Sure. No, not to correct the record. I just wanted to, Senator Lujan brought up an issue about the families not being able to meet with Secretary Duffy. So I took the opportunity to step outside and called the Secretary. He gave me his chief's cell phone number. So for the families, he's expecting your call. If you could call him at your convenience, and the Secretary is more than happy to meet with you. So I'll hand this to whoever the family representative is so that we can get that meeting scheduled. And he obviously is wanting to do that as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bedford, thank you for being here today. Thank you for the opportunity to meet with you ahead of this hearing to learn more about your priorities for the FAA. As the senator representing Wisconsin on this committee, I would be remiss if I didn't mention how disheartened I was to read about some of your past comments about Milwaukee. It has been reported that you told a group of investors that, quote, "I don't care how cheap you make it, you don't go there unless you have to." Mr. Bedford, couldn't be more wrong on that account. And if confirmed, I invite you to Milwaukee to come see for yourself all that the city and the state of Wisconsin has to offer. One of the FAA's most successful partnerships is the Contract Tower Program. 265 smaller airports participate in this important air traffic safety program, including 9 in my state of Wisconsin. These towers support rural air service and flight schools across the country, as well as DoD flight training operations and military readiness. What assurances can you give us today that contract towers will be a high priority for you if you're confirmed?
Well, thank you for the question, Senator Baldwin, and thank you for the courtesy of the time in your office. I'm going to push back strongly on that quote. I don't know where that came from. I've got 2 Marquette graduates back here. Be very unhappy if I let that stand in the record. I love Milwaukee. I've spent in Milwaukee. We tried to save Midwest Airlines in Milwaukee. Right. It was a brutal, brutal competitive environment. And unfortunately, Milwaukee has lost a lot of direct service as a result of that. We used to have service to Omaha and Duluth and Eau Claire and
It's how I got to Washington, D.C. as a member of the House, so through Milwaukee.
I would love to see a resurgence of opportunity in Milwaukee. So I'm not sure where that quote came from. Maybe I was drinking. I apologize. Contract towers, I utilize them frequently. You know, as my own flight training, I'm flying in places like Anderson, Indiana, Muncie, Indiana, and they're all contract towers. So they, when you think about the fact that we've got thousands and thousands of student pilots, they rely on these contract towers almost exclusively for their flight training. So they're a very vital component of the ecosystem here in the United States.
Thank you. Last Congress, I was proud to author provisions in the Federal Aviation Administration Authorization Act that strengthen protections for air travelers with disabilities, many of whom are our nation's veterans. The law includes provisions from my Air Carrier Access Amendments Act to ensure that airplanes are designed to accommodate people with disabilities and that airlines meet accessibility standards, including for individuals who use wheelchairs. Will you commit to enforcing these measures and to working with us to continue to improve passenger safety for all Americans, including those with disabilities?
Thank you for the question, Senator Baldwin. If it's the law, of course, we'll enforce it. But I want to tell you that I think I may have shared with you in your office, and I certainly had this conversation with Ranking Member Duckworth. We've had firsthand family experience with mobility challenges when our daughter suffered a spinal cord stroke that rendered her a quadriplegic. So thankfully, by the grace of God, she's recovered about 85% of her mobility. But we absolutely understand. My wife, Maria, runs a foundation that helps people with mobility issues, providing them wheelchair accessible vans, you know, home upgrades for handicap accessibility. I mean, so this is an issue near and dear to our hearts.
I appreciate that. Last question, improving recruitment and retention in aviation workforce needs to be a top priority in the FAA, and pilots are a vital piece of that workforce. We talked about this yesterday. We discussed my Flight Education Access Act that I sponsor with, it's a bipartisan bill that Senator Sullivan is a co-sponsor of. It's aimed at increasing student loan limits for students in flight training programs to help make pilots' careers more accessible by addressing the high cost of flight education and training while maintaining our standards for safety. So if confirmed, what strategies will you implement to increase the pipeline of qualified pilots?
Well, thank you for the question. We absolutely have had workforce shortages. Pilots have been critical, but also maintenance technicians. So there's a lot of work to do here to convince young people that these are viable careers, transformational careers where you don't have to spend, you know, time in college. Absolutely, and you know, we've worked together on granting issues and trying to, you know, get our military veterans an opportunity to come into these transformational careers. So I would love to continue to work with you on that.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Next is Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Senator Baldwin. I think I'm chairing, and I'm going to call. So, Mr. Bedford, thank you for being here. Thank you for your willingness to serve. I appreciate our meeting the other day. I do want to just, Senator Baldwin said, in terms of our bipartisan bill, but pilots also pay back their loans at a very high rate, too. So it's a good deal for the federal government. A lot of other people get student loans, maybe not have the highest rate of repayment, but that's not a problem with our pilots. That's another reason why our bill makes a lot of sense. I want to focus a little bit, as you can imagine, on Alaska aviation safety. We had a good discussion about the FAA initiative, the FAA safety initiative, FAA Alaska safety initiative. You know the background of it. This is to bring down the very high rates of crashes and deaths in my state. You know, I want to recognize the families from the latest tragedy here, but you know we also had a crash in Alaska, the Bering Air crash in a timeline not too far after the American Airlines crash here. So this is impacting all of us, safety. Secretary Duffy is really focused on Alaska aviation safety, which I've appreciated. They put real money behind the FAA initiative, $25 million a year. And then when he did the big ATC press conference with President Trump, President Trump announced 174 new weather observation stations in Alaska. So that's really important to us. I want to thank the President, the Secretary for their focus on Alaska aviation safety. Can I get your commitment, if confirmed, to get up to Alaska with me soon after your confirmation to meet with all of our different stakeholders and to get a better understanding of our challenges on infrastructure, weather reporting, all the things that most lower 48 airports have. We don't have a lot of those, and I think the Secretary and even the President have recognized that need for infrastructure. It's important. In the FAA reauthorization bill, I had several amendments, very bipartisan. My colleagues here all support them, that we need better infrastructure to keep.
Well, thank you for the question, Senator Sullivan, and for your hospitality in your office the other day. Alaska is unique. I think every member I've spoken to acknowledges the uniqueness of a state where, air travel it replaces the lack of highway infrastructure.
Yeah, we have over 230 communities that are not connected by roads. And
So
most states, that's
when we think of essential air
fathomable.
service, I can't think of a more essential service than air travel in Alaska, and making that safer is a common objective. We think about the tourism and hunting and infrastructure and just general commerce. It's absolutely vital that we maintain the safety of Alaska. I think we've seen a lot of improvement there over the decades.
Yep.
More can be done.
Good. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I'd love to visit.
Good. I'd love to have you up there. Let me, when we talk about safety, in my experience in this committee, I love our FAA in Alaska. The air traffic controllers do heroic work. I can't thank them enough for the great job they do. By the way, in Alaska Center, they just are not about aviation safety in Alaska. If you're flying from Chicago to Tokyo, halfway through that flight, the FAA folks in my state kind of deliver those planes all the way to Asia, right? So they do great work for the whole country. It's industry, it's pilots, it's us. All of us are the key to making our aviation system safer. We've always had the gold standard in aviation safety. I've really tried to work in this position with everybody, including our outstanding pilots. One of the issues you and I talked about that's come up, it's kind of bubbling up in Europe, this idea of not having two qualified pilots on the flight deck in terms of safe operations. It's not over here yet, but I want to get your commitment to maintaining the standard, and if something like that came over, to a really hard look before anything happens, talking to industry, talking to us, talking to the pilots. Can I get your commitment, or do you have any views on that? I know something's bubbling up over in Europe.
So I tell you, I don't know much about the conversation that's going on in Europe as it relates to single pilot. In fact, not until this confirmation hearing process had anybody ever mentioned it to me before. It seems like that's a long ways away.
Yeah.
But what's not so long ways away is what we're seeing, technology being developed by Garmin with Autoland systems. So imagine you are in Alaska and you've got an incapacitated single pilot operation, and you can hit the button and the airplane will safely land itself. So I do think that there are ways we can absolutely use technology to improve aviation safety. I don't think it goes so far as to tell us we need to remove a trained aviator from the cockpit.
Yeah, I think it's the combination of both, and I want an AI guy landing my airplane. I want a pilot, right? Especially in my state. Finally, just your commitment again. I think Secretary Duffy has really done a great job about laying out the vision of the ATC upgrade. The budget reconciliation bill is going to have a very, as Chairman Cruz said, big significant chunk of money to start that process. It's very important. Do you have any views on how we would go about doing that? It's going to be important. We'll have a lot of oversight here, but it's a good start, and the Secretary of Transportation has done a great job leading this effort.
I 100%. Secretary Duffy has taken on an enormous task trying to expedite the modernization of the system. I look forward, if confirmed, to getting in there and giving him another set of hands to get the job done. But as we discussed in your office, I'm going to bring a more commercial approach to FAA modernization, where we use proven practices and disciplines in order to create a project management plan, have an open and transparent request for proposals, evaluate the providers, make sure we get strong contractual commitments on operating on budget and delivering the goods, penalties when they fail to deliver the goods or it's not operating to the specifications. I think we can bring a significant amount of discipline to this process that will bring comfort to oversight, that we can competently execute the plan.
Good, and I think the comments that were made earlier about acquisition reform, so it doesn't take 4 years to start getting the equipment,
Praise
is
God.
a really, really, really important one.
Amen. Yes, sir.
Great. I will gladly hand the gavel back to the real chairman here, to Chairman Cruz.
Excellent, thank you. Senator Hickenlooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Bedford. It's good to see you in this position that I think it was 15 or 16 years ago. We first met when I was mayor of Denver and you were just taking over a bankrupt Frontier Airlines.
Yes.
And I remember that you made a lot of difficult decisions and had to make cuts everywhere. And my memory was that you won them back, the staff, at least the ones that I stayed in touch with. And, you know, as mayor and as governor, I always flew all the airlines, still fly all the airlines. Anyway, let me ask you a couple of questions appreciating that you've obviously learned a great deal over your 25, I guess 30 years now in the business. We've had communication outages that impact air traffic control operations. We've seen them increase in severity and frequency. Again, I emphasize the errors are safe. People should not feel in any way in risk. But I mean, we've got these redundant systems for safety. But any outage for any duration should be unacceptable. And I think that, what we're going to do is, as these news stories proliferate, we're going to erode the trust that we've built over many years. The Denver Air Routes Traffic Control Center recently had an outage that we talked about briefly that impacted primary and backup personnel, backup communications channels used by ATC personnel. So what ideas, I mean, you've obviously been asked this a million times and are thinking about, what ideas do you have of how we can begin to address this as quickly as possible?
Thank you for the question, Senator Hickenlooper, and thank you again for the time. It was great catching up with you. It's been too long. I agree. We need to ensure the public that travel's safe. It is safe. There are multiple layers of redundancy in the system, but we don't want to get to the second, third, and fourth layer of redundancy. We don't want to have our crews having to get on the 121.5 guard frequency in order to talk with another air traffic control system. We don't want them to have to rely on TCAS for traffic guidance and avoidance. So the system is old, it's tired, it needs to be replaced. I just want to let the folks who are watching this hearing know that there has been universal, not broad or significant, but universal support on both sides of the aisle in both chambers that I've spoken to that support modernizing this air traffic.
And tied in with this, some of the issues are around transparency, and that the FAA has the question about whether they have accurate records and when do they release them. And I hope that you will commit towards more transparency, earlier release of this information when we have occasions to have concerns.
Well, I would add to it, I think one of the challenges we have is a lack of trust.
Right.
There's lack of trust issues within the FAA and between the FAA and some of the stakeholders. And it's been explained to me why some of those issues there are, but we have to move past that. We will have to embrace transparency and accountability as we move forward this process.
I couldn't agree. I think more transparency increases accountability and actually helps staff do a better job. And I think you get that.
I 100% agree.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Northern Colorado Regional Airport, we talked about a little, is among several airports across Colorado that lack a physical control tower. And to overcome this, the state of Colorado has made a bunch of investments to attract and install a certified remote tower technology system in Fort Collins. The FAA recently had a timeline for remote tower certification to complete at the New Jersey Technical Center this year. How can you help ensure that airports are going to be able to quickly access and install these new technologies?
Well, thank you for the question, Senator Hickenlooper. I'm actually confused by this because we invented this technology. This is part of, we did this, I think, in 2013. We certified, or I won't say certified, but we invented this technology, and it's being deployed abroad. It's confusing to me why it's taken so long to utilize something that we developed and we can manufacture and deploy here. So I don't have the exact answer for you, but I really look forward to working with you and many communities that could take advantage of remote tower.
Yeah, so many of the smaller communities could benefit. You've obviously found many creative ways with Republic Airlines to make training affordable for new pilots and to train maintenance personnel, engineers and such. To help with recruitment, the FAA has established an Air Traffic Collegiate Training Initiative Partnership Program, brings collegiate aviation programs together with the FAA to prepare graduates for Air Traffic Controller Academy. Can you support this program?
I do.
Great. I appreciate that. I look at what this is the kind of things that the federal government, we should really be making sure we encourage and promote them as much as possible.
Just as a small aside, I mean, we partner at Republic with over 44 university programs. I mean, we have urgent workforce needs. Many people have a hand in this solution.
Right. Well, great. I yield back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Moran.
Chairman, thank you. Mr. Bedford, good morning, now afternoon. I was delayed getting here because I was questioning Secretary Hegseth at an Appropriations Committee hearing that is in concurring time as this hearing. Doesn't diminish my interest in your nomination and your confirmation, but I did use that opportunity to question Secretary Hegseth about VIP or convenience flights from the Pentagon along the route that involves DCA. He assured me that there are no current authorizations, nor will there be an authorization for VIP or convenience flights along, quote, that route, referring, I think, to the route at Pentagon. He said that he and Secretary Duffy are in close coordination. I was hoping he would commit to making certain that there was no flights occurring until the FAA, Department of Transportation, determined there was a safe manner in which to conduct those flights. But the airspace control is the FAA's, is the Department of Transportation's, not the Pentagon's. Is that true?
Chairman Moran, thank you for the question and for just the hospitality in your office the other day. Thank you for that. My understanding is the FAA is supreme when it comes to the control of the airspace, but we want to be good partners with the Department of Defense, and we have protocols on how to do that, multiple protocols, as I understand. And as an aviator, you know, we create military operating areas, restricted space, prohibited space, line of fire space, alert zones. I mean, we have lots of ways we can accommodate, and we will accommodate the Department of Defense training needs, but we can't have this mixed-use traffic in Class B airspace. So I know Secretary Duffy's very passionate about this issue, as I would.
You would use the authorities you just described to make certain that whatever traffic was involving Pentagon flights involving rotary aircraft you would be certain they would be safe to do so before allowing them. True?
Yes, sir.
I've introduced legislation as a result of the crash of January the 29th on ADS-B. It's been a point of contention since the crash and since TSB's investigation. This legislation repeals the NDAA, our National Defense Authorization legislation. It was passed some time ago. It had a provision in it that allowed the Secretary of Transportation to allow exemptions in enabling ADS-B in and out. And it also allows for the Secretary of Transportation to require the installation of ADS-B in. Your reaction to that topic and that kind of legislation?
So absolutely ADS-B in can be a significant safety improvement for the visibility of traffic because it incorporates the traffic that's on the ground. So if we look at the alerting systems that we have and we're relying on, even when we're using surface radars, it still requires the controller to be in the loop. So there's this process where it has to go to the tower and then from the tower to communicate. And we lose vital seconds on potential incursions and excursions. So, you know, the challenge we have out of the civil fleet, which I believe is close to 7,700 aircraft, we need to find a way to give all of them access. And I know that may be a controversial statement, but here's the good news. For the smaller aircraft, older aircraft that are currently unable to comply with ADS-B-N, Collins, Honeywell, L3 have solutions now where we can get to something that's almost equivalent to ADS-B-N on that rest of the fleet that today might not be able to adopt it.
You would work with me and others to find that right solution?
Welcome that opportunity.
Thank you. One of the things that NTSB found that was somewhat astounding to me, their data decided in their preliminary report of the tragedy, there was some 15,214 close proximity events between commercial aircraft and helicopters that occurred over a three-year span. When we discussed FAA vulnerabilities in my office, you indicated organizational silos existed, and this might be an example of one of those silos in which the FAA aviation safety and the air traffic offices are not responding to what seems to me to be a pretty compelling case. If there's 15,000 close proximity events, someone at the FAA might want to do something different. And I highlight this, I don't know there's a necessary response from you, but I highlight that there are statistics that indicate those proximate events, but nothing, it wasn't a signal that we ought to be paying more attention to something.
So I'd like to say two things, if I may, sir.
Please.
One, to assure the traveling public that close proximity events are not in and of themselves a worry. It may be the fact that we've lost, the 3-mile, lateral separation can trigger a close proximity event. It's not necessarily indicative of a safety problem. The 85 near misses, on the other hand, are indicative of a safety problem and indicative of failure of the FAA's SMS system to detect that and mitigate it. So that absolutely needs critical assessment. And I will tell you, and as the team here from Republic would tell you, we have tools called FOQA, Flight Operations Quality Assurance, where we're doing a lot of data analysis on our systems, and we're using that to inform our training. I think the FAA could absolutely stand up something similar to that to help inform them of risks in the system that may not otherwise be detectable.
In a very quick moment, I just want to highlight the importance of the FAA contract tower program and see if you have an appreciation for what we're able to do in airports that would not have the circumstances to have a different air traffic control tower.
Well, thank you for the question, Chairman Ryan. Unfortunately, you were occupied in the other hearing, so we did have a lot of conversation about contract towers and their necessity as part of facilitating our
You can just tell me I liked your answer and all.
I liked your answer.
All right. Thank you. That I liked your answer.
I like mine. Okay. I'll cooperate you on with contract towers. They're important.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Senator Rosen.
Well, thank you, Chair Cruz. Appreciate you holding this hearing. Mr. Bedford, thank you for your willingness to serve. I see your family, a very brand new baby out there, so peaceful, so quiet, and behaving well. But anyway, as Senator Sullivan just talked about, I want to stress the importance of, I keep smiling, I'm looking at the baby. I'm smiling at you too,
well,
but it's really hard not to smile at that brand new baby. What can I tell you? Importance of the two-pilot flight deck. So for decades, the two-pilot flight deck has been the cornerstone of commercial aviation safety in the United States. The presence of both a pilot in command and a second in command ensures redundancy, effective workload management, and it's a critical layer of risk mitigation, I believe, in the event of in-flight emergencies, any system failures or incapacitation. This model has contributed to one of the safest aviation systems in the world. Currently, the EU Aviation Safety Agency is considering a proposal that would allow a single pilot to remain on the flight deck during cruise while the second pilot rests, an initiative they're even taking up before a comprehensive safety study has been completed. And this approach stands in stark contrast to U.S. regulations, which mandate a minimum of 2 pilots for the scheduled air carrier operations. So I have kind of a two-part question. Do you believe it's safe to only allow 1 pilot to remain on the flight deck during any portion of a commercial flight? And When you become the administrator, how would you approach this international pressure or technological proposals that conflict with the long U.S. safety standards? And I would say success here, but we don't have incidences. That means it's working, right? We don't want to find out it doesn't work by having something terrible happen.
Well, thank you for the question, Senator Rosen. I can tell you we have some experience in the country with this issue. When we have, you look at the Roselawn accident, it's a situation where a pilot left the cockpit, a flight attendant took the seat, the airplane suffered significant icing, went into a stall spin. I think it would be a pretty heavy lift, to get us to a place where we would welcome that technology. At our Lift Academy, our investment, we invest in a company called Cape Air. I think maybe Senator Markey would be very familiar with Cape Air. We could operate that as a single pilot operation. We put 2 pilots in it.
Yeah, thank you. I want to move on to a little bit of Nevada-specific issues because in response to unique airspace challenges at Harry Reid International Airport in Las Vegas, I authored Section 744 of last year's FAA reauthorization that's going to improve the agency's airspace obstruction analysis. The law now requires the FAA to undertake a robust analysis of potential airspace hazards near certain airports due to factors like, well, building hotel construction near runways. You've been to Las Vegas, so many people have. It's a top vacation destination in the world. And you know the proximity of our hotels to that airport runway. So, however, nearly a year after the reauthorization bill was signed into law, there was little progress in implementing the statutory requirement until I raised it at an oversight hearing last month. Since then, I'm pleased that FAA's improved communication with airport officials. So, if confirmed, will you commit to ensuring that FAA follows the law and implements what I believe is this critical factor? You don't want balconies so close maybe to our runways. Just one example.
I will absolutely give you that commitment.
Thank you. I'm going to keep on the subject of Harry Reid Airport capacity. Like I said, I like to say the top vacation destination in the country. We're right up there at the top, but we're the world's leading entertainment, sports destination. We have lots going on, and we're quickly becoming the global destination as well. We got 40 significant sporting events over the last year. We have Super Bowls and World Cups and you name it, and concerts, and these major events, they bring tourists, participants from all over the world. They travel on larger jet planes as well as private jets to our airport. Harry Reid International welcomed over 58 million visitors in 2024, the most in our history, and we want more visitors to come to the Silver State, but at this rate, we're expected to reach capacity within 5 years. We won't be able to handle any more flights. So, we've been working with the FAA for years to build a supplemental airport in Southern Nevada, which the local economy greatly needs. I know the FAA has made great progress on this issue. We've been communicating with the airport and that, but I'd like your commitment to continue to work on this and maybe speed it up a little bit so we can support all the wonderful things that are happening in my state and, of course, in Las Vegas.
I think it's an exciting opportunity to build a brand new airport, so I'd be happy to work with you.
Thank you very much. I yield back my time to Senator Markey.
Thank you. Senator Lummis.
Oh, Senator Lummis. I see her
thank you,
over there.
Mr. Chairman. We haven't had a chance to meet yet, and I know the clock is running on some votes over in the Capitol building, so I'm going to be quick. You and I will meet on June 17th. I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to give you a heads up on the 2 issues that I will be emphasizing when we meet. One is, and this is down in the weeds, but very important to my state. I'm from Wyoming. Section 702 of the FAA reauthorization law addressed airport improvement program dollars and the eligibility for taxiways and taxi lanes at airports. Congress clarified eligibility last year in our FAA bill, making very specific language in the authorizations. Somebody at the FAA keeps tinkering with that language, and they're making it difficult for small airports, and I'll name one specifically, Rock Springs, Wyoming, to get the airport paving funding it needs, that it's eligible for pursuant to
the statutory criteria. But somebody at FAA keeps tinkering with that language, and it's making it difficult for my state and my airports to gain access to those funds. So for reference to our June 17th meeting, that's going to be high on my list of conversations I want to have with you, and thank you. The other one is about weather equipment. So, you know, a lot of weather changes in Wyoming, and very major weather changes. So there used to be at the National Weather Service a training program for when the weather technology equipment goes down and someone has to be sent out to repair it. Hours and sometimes days can go by where air traffic is down. And so the FAA received the authority from the National Weather Service to train weather observers. It's not, you know, a major meteorologist type training, but it's something that can allow you to understand the cloud cover, the visibility. But it's not happening. The FAA has never implemented this. And so my plea is either implement the program, train some people, or give the program back to the National Weather Service because they were doing it when they had that authorization. So those are the two very specific Wyoming issues that I'll be looking forward to discussing with you on June 17th when we meet. I've read your qualifications. They're tremendous. You obviously have experience working in Western states where weather-related issues are significant, and there are a lot of small airports.
Cody, Gillette, Sheridan, Jackson Hole, yes, I've been to all of them.
You got it.
State, challenging territory to get around.
Indeed it is. And you're taking on a heavy load, high profile with all of the technology updates that are necessary. I'm looking forward to working with you hand in hand. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Markey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. Mr. Bedford, thank you for being here. The American airline crash in January was an unspeakable tragedy. 67 people died, including 6 members of the Boston Skating Club and other people from Boston as well. And that crash echoes a plane crash in 1961 where 10 members of the Boston Skating Club were killed. So it's traumatic up in Boston, and that team in 61 was the core of the 1964 Olympic skating team. And so obviously the families of the victims are very, very concerned. They want to make sure that the necessary changes are made for safety. So do you commit to ensuring that the strongest possible safeguards are put in place in order to ensure that this never happens again?
Well, thank you for the question, Senator Markey, and thank you for the hospitality in your office the other day. I had the opportunity to meet with a few of the family members from 5342. They were kind enough to present to us a really well thought out document for reform priorities for safer skies. So I think they've got the right approach here. We need to partner with them to fix this problem once and for all.
So you think they have the right approach, and you're committing to putting all necessary changes in place?
I am.
Thank you. Our aviation system is safest and strongest when workers are fairly paid and have a seat at the table for important safety decisions. It is absolutely crucial that the FAA administrator recognizes the importance of these aviation workers. Mr. Bedford, do you agree that the aviation workforce plays a critical role in the safety and effectiveness of our aviation system?
I do, Senator. I'll tell you, we've seen some challenges there too. Aircraft damage on the ramp. We've had loss of life, through poor safety practices around the aircraft. We can do some improvement there.
Thank you. And obviously, I'm glad to hear that. At his confirmation hearing here, Secretary Duffy agreed with that assessment and committed to convene airport workers and industry representatives to assess the need for an airport service worker wage and benefit standard. Mr. Bedford, can you commit to following through on Secretary Duffy's promise and convening airport service workers?
I can.
You can, beautiful. And when might you can make that convocation?
If you can give me some